Hello and welcome. So we have some similar triangles. Let's go ahead and get started. So first off, we are going to be solving this sucker. I've already taken the liberty of writing some information down. Alright, so first off, we're given these two lengths, which is the 18 and 25. Alright, and then I decided we're trying to find BD, AB, and AD. So I decided to just call those variables X, Y, and Z and stick them on the diagram. Just as an easier way to refer to them, right? And then from there, I said, okay, so how many similar triangles are we dealing with? And I found three, right? Because we have this smaller similar triangle, we have this medium similar triangle, and then we have the whole thing as a triangle as well. So I was like, okay, so there are three of them, so I drew three triangles off to the side. Now this is where the magic happens, right? You want to make sure that you draw all three triangles, make sure you know which one is referring to which, right? Small, medium, large, and make sure they're all in the same orientation. This is going to make it a whole lot easier to set up your proportions. Okay, so let's just fill in the information. So here's the smaller of the small side. Okay, let me just make this obvious. Small of the small side, right? That's Z right there. So we're going to put a little z right there. Right? Here's our medium length of the smaller triangle. That's your x. But that's also the smaller length of our medium triangle. So see it also is an adjoined side right there. So those are both x's. Alright, then our y is going to be the hypotenuse of our smaller triangle, but it's also going to be the smaller side of our largest triangle. So there's y on both of those. Okay, and then we just keep it going. I'd say, okay, what about the next one? We have ourselves 25 here, which will be the medium side of our largest triangle and the hypotenuse of our medium triangle. So that should be 25 there and 25 there. And then last but not least, we have the last little piece of information here, which is going to be... Ooh, I've run out of highlighters. No, I haven't used red. Ha ha ha. Here's 18. Okay, and that'll be the longer side of our medium triangle right there. Now you might be wondering, don't we know that hypotenuse? We do, right? Because if we know that entire side makes up of the z and the 18, well then z plus 18 is the hypotenuse. That's the largest side of our largest triangle right there. Okay, and that's it. Whew, that's all the information down. Now, the question is, what do we want to solve for first? Do you want to solve for the x, the y, or the z? Now, on this one, you don't really know. But we do know that we're going to just need to pick the triangles that we see the same variable on. Like, so for example, if we want to solve for x, we want to use the first two triangles because you'll notice there's an x on both of those, but no x's at the end here. Okay, so if we want to set up those proportions, here's an x, there's its corresponding side, here's an x, there's its corresponding side. I like going bigger to smaller, so I'm going to say 18 over x equals x over z, because it's big to small equals big to small, right? Now, as we're looking at that, can we solve for x? No, because you have two variables in the same equation, which means you won't be able to solve for it. Not yet, at least. Alright, so without knowing what either x or z is, we can't do anything, so let's set up a proportion for another variable. Let's do the y. Alright, so we see a y on our last triangle and on the first triangle. So same idea, here's a y, here's its corresponding side, here's a y, here's its corresponding side. So y over z equals z plus 18 over y. Not pretty. Definitely not pretty. That's not helpful because you also have two z's chilling in that proportion. Gross. Alright, let's set up the proportion for z and maybe this one won't be able to be solved for. Okay, so on this one, I say, okay, here's a z and here's a z. Okay, so now we just keep it going from there. And I say, okay, well, now we have z plus 18 over y equals y over z. Oh, that seems familiar, doesn't it? Sigh. But it's okay. right? You can still go through this and we can still solve it. But what we need to do is we need to use the one proportion without any variables at all. Is that while you're tempted to use these two with your z's because you have proportions, that'll just give you that thing, which isn't helpful. But what you do notice is that this side can also correspond to that one, doesn't it? And if we want to use that same triangle, couldn't we use this as our other corresponding side? So z plus 18 over 25 equals 25 over 18. Are there any variables other than z in that? No, there isn't, right? So while you do generally want to match up variables, if you see a z here and a z there, those are generally the match. But if you start getting in the case where you have multiple variables running around and your proportions aren't helping, where you have multiple variables in it, see if you can find a proportion without variables and go from there. Okay, so let's just solve the sucker. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 18, multiply it to both sides. I'm also going to multiply the 25. Because fractions are division, we undo division with multiplication. So when you multiply, those will cancel, and you're left with 18 times z plus 18 equals 25 times 25. All right, and then just solve for z. So 18 times z is just 18z. And then we have 18 times 18, which is going to leave us with 300. And 24. On the other side, we have 25 squared, so 25 times 25, 625. Okay, solve for z. You want to get it alone. So then from there, you're going to minus the 324, both sides. 18z equals, and then 625 minus 324, and you're left with 301. Divide by 18, both sides, and we get 301 divided by 18. Now, keep in mind, if you want to leave that as a fraction, I would. Your final answer, you will need the decimal, but we're about to use d in all of our other setups. Because don't we know, I don't know how I just solved for d. There's no d's anywhere. There is a z though. Hello. When we're solving for z, as you'll notice that z is in all of your other proportions. So now that we know what z is, you can literally solve for x and y, and you don't want to use a decimal value, a rounded decimal value in the other answer, so I'm going to keep it as a fraction for now. In the end, we will turn it into a decimal. Alright, so let's just solve this sucker next. So I'm going to multiply by an x and a z, because when we do, x's go on the left, z's on the right. And then from there, we have 18z, so 18 times z, and x times x, x squared. Alright, solve for x, take the square root. Remember that means plus and minus, but we're talking about lengths, so the minus isn't actually going to make a difference here. And we have x equals the square root of 18z as a final answer. Ooh, that just closed on me. So as we're looking at this, I'd say, okay, so now we have the square root of 18 times z. Now z, we know what z is. That's 301 over, oops, didn't mean to do a double fraction there. 301 over 18. There you go. You have now solved for x. Okay, so at 17.349. Done. Okay, so 17.349. Finished. Nothing too crazy. Let's do the same for y, right? So multiply y. Let me move this down. Okay, multiply y both sides and a z both sides. So that way your z's will cancel on the left, y's on the right, and you're left with y squared equals, and then that z is going to distribute through, so z squared plus 18z. Okay, take the square root, plus and minus, but you only need the minus, so y equals the square root of z squared plus 18z. Again, don't freak out. You know what z is. Plug it in, right? So then we go from there and you say, okay, so it's the square root of z squared, so 301 over 18. Yes, you do need these parentheses. So, and then from there, z squared, and then plus 18 times z, 301 over 18. Oops. There we go. And there's your value for y, 24.096. Okay, same thing here. 24.096, and then you can now find out whatever the decimal for z is, which is going to be 16.722. Okay, and then you're done, you're finished. Okay, so while it may look really scary to begin with, right, just make sure you're keeping an eye. Your proportions are key on this one. On this one, you got to be a little more careful. There's really only one way you can solve it, and you have to find the single variable that you can find to find the other two. Alright, but that's all there is. Thanks for watching.